Welcome fellow painters and decorators of the interweb. This is Phil Beckwith, the professional painter and decorator. Bit of a video, bit of a light-hearted video. A few questions been asked. Paper hanging tools. What are Phil Beckwith's paper hanging tools? So today we're just going to have a little sit and a talk. Get yourself a cup of tea and I'll talk you through what I've got. It's nothing complicated. I'll explain what each tool is. You might even be a painter and decorator stroke DIY amateur paper hanger and have never seen the tools that I'm using. So today I'm going to do you a bit of a walk through. I've got them set out on the table outside. It's a nice day, might as well make the most of the sunshine. I'll talk through what I've got, discuss a few newer products that I've got that I've been trying, and let's see if I can help you improve on your paper hanging with the tools that I use. So I like this term. Without further ado, let's crack on. Right, here we go. I've laid them out on the table. I'll just go through them one by one and then I'll go sit back down and we'll talk it all the way through. Right, first things first. We all know what this is. Hanging brush. We've got some straight edges here for cutting. We've got a laser liner. I'll discuss that in a minute. We've got the old original traditional plumb bob. Yeah, not used that for ages because that has superseded it. I've got shears. They're not scissors, they're shears. Now I've got 3 pairs there and I'll talk about those in a minute. But we've got shears. We've got a pencil. Now if you look at this pencil, I've got some tape round it. I'll explain that as well. Right, a ruler. Now this is a plastic ruler. It's a metre. I don't like using the tape measure style. I like a proper metre ruler. If you've seen other videos where I'm using it, you'll understand why. Now these used to be made of wood, boxed wood, a bit like the seam rollers, but plastic. They're still about a tenner. The Offler snap-off blades. Always use a snap-off blade. Don't use the Stanley blades that are a fixed blade because they go blunt quite quick. At least you've got at least 10 cuts to a snap-off blade, which is good. I've got me, call them a smoother. I've got a couple of smoothers here. These are brilliant. I'll talk about those in a moment. And then I've got some, you know what these are? Seam rollers. Now can you see there's a bit of a difference between all of them? Can you see that? Right, so I'm going to sit back down. I'm going to get my apprentice to bring stuff over to me. We'll talk about that in a minute as well. We'll talk about that. You see, I don't think we missed anything. We've got the blades there as well for the snap-off blade. Right, there's everything that I use. And I'll just do a quick whiz through and talk through all the bits and pieces. I'll sit down and let's go through it. See you in a mo. Right, I've shown you what I've got on the table. Now I'm going to go one by one. It's not going to be ages, but I'll talk through individual products and what I'm using, where I use them, what I think of them, and these are in no particular order. Right, we're going to start with seam rollers. Do you know what a seam roller is? Right, seam rollers are what you use to, if you've got your butt joints, you butt them down, you can seam roller them, just press them down in case you get some edges that are just springing slightly. Self-explanatory, seam roller. Also use a seam roller for lining paper. Did you know that? Use a seam roller for lining paper. Make sure you butt joint on lining paper. I'm sick of seeing people leaving gaps in lining paper and filling them. Don't want to go into that. Look over my left shoulder if you want to know about lining papers. Right, let's start with these seam rollers. Right, my day-to-day steam roller was this one. I've had this years. Now it's a single arm seam roller. Can you see it's quite smooth and flat, it's well worn. Now it's got to the point now that the end comes off and it's broke. These are the boxwood seam rollers. They're a hardwood wood. Now every time that you use it you might get a bit of paste on it because you're seam rolling things down. Yeah, wipe it down, wash it, job's a good one. Now, before every job, I even might just run a bit of sandpaper around it just to smooth it off, because that is lovely and smooth. The beauty of this is, and I'll come on to one of the newer seam rollers. We'll talk about that in a minute. Newer seam roller. That is quite, can I use the word fluid? It moves about. It's not fixed. Now, probably over the years it was more fixed, but it moves about, which is good, because sometimes you need to get a little bit of pressure but not be fixed in one spot, and you can manipulate your seam roller to how, does that make sense? It moves with you. You'll know what I mean. The other beauty of this is, now the edges are slightly just rounded off because they've worn, which is great, because when you are seam rolling something, you don't want a definitive sharp edge creasing into your wallpaper. Makes sense. Right, I'm going to show you some other ones I've got, because they're all the same principle. Right, you might not have seen this before. Don't use this very often. Can you see that? It's what you call a barrel. This is a two-armed barrel seam roller. Very much like that one, but it's two-armed. Now that you can get a bit more pressure on it. The difference is with this one, it's more curved. You can see that compared to that being flat. Right? So you can appreciate that the weight distribution as you're pressing that down isn't in one spot, either one side. It's not in one, of course it's in one spot, but it's not putting the full pressure of the whole width in one spot. You can use it from side to, put that down, you can use it from that side to the other, moving it around. And also your highlighted part is where it's pressing down. So if you use that highlighted over the barrel, I call it highlighted, where it's raised, you're not putting side pressure on to press into wallpaper. That's why I use a barrel seam roller. So you've got traditional single arm and then a barrel. Your traditional double arm, single arm. Now my new one, to replace this one that is breaking, is an axis. Now I can tell this is new because look at it. Can you see that? Look at the difference. We're sharper on the edges. It's like still hardwood. I'm in the process of sanding it down each time I use it, so we'll get it more like that. But can you see the difference? Look at the size. Still like that, but do I like that because it's more worn out? Quite possibly. But that, no, that's not broke on me. There's not much play in it, which I prefer the play that I've got in there, but can't have everything, can you? But no, very good. My next one. Now some papers, you've probably seen them, have little, we'll call them little pearl beads on them. Now you can't use a seam roller that's hard with some papers that have got a textured pearl bead. So this one, I had to pick this one up from B&Q of all places. It's a sponge. So you can still get a little bit of pressure on, but it's not going to damage your bead. So that is the same principle, but it's a softer one. You see that? So this is for papers that have got little pearls on them, little like glass bead pearls. They're not glass, they're plastic. So that's that. Right. This, what do you think of this? Now this was given to me by another decorator. Mike, if you're listening, thank you very much. It's been great over the last few months for me having this. It's been great to try out, and you've already had a bit of feedback on it. Now this is a peacock seam roller, multi-tool seam roller. Can you see what you've got there? You've got, you can see, that would roll your edges or your wallpaper into an internal angle. I'll come on to that in a minute. This is like a traditional seam roller style, i.e. one like that, but look at it, it's bigger. And it's also got a V-cut, 45, well is it 45 degree? It's probably not that. Oh, I don't know what degree that is, might be a bit more. A V-cut there, which is to roll down your outside external angles. Now I've been using this because Mike says give it a go, see what you think, because I do quite a bit of papering. It's good. There's some elements to it that I would alter. Right, one, the size, it's too big, it's cumbersome. when you start using these fit in your pocket lovely, right? So all I would say is that is too big. It's cumbersome. That is very sharp. I say it's sharp. When you're pressing into an angle, it's making a little mark. Not too keen on that. The idea is very good to push into angles that you can't get into, but not too keen. Now this, I think this resinous, it's like a slight rubber. I think this resinous material's pretty good, but again, one, it's a little bit too big, and two, can you see this? I'm looking at it. That edge is sharp, so when you're actually rolling down your seams on your wallpaper, it's actually digging into your paper. Whereas I'll go back to this, an original one that's slightly worn on the edges. It's a softer edge. That needs to be softer, as in not so angular. Bit of an oxymoron sort of saying. It is soft, but that is too sharp. And when you're trying to get wallpapers down, particularly some heavier weight wallpapers, it can actually put a bit of a mark in it. Same with lighter weight papers. That external angle, I can get the idea of it. I don't know whether it's needed, because you've seen in previous videos I'll do there, going round an external angle, I'm overlapping by a few millimeters and then rehanging the paper back onto it. I can get it down and hold it down without the need of that. But very interesting to try it. Designed a little bit more with input from a decorator would probably be slightly different, and for me, professional painter and decorator paper hanger, I hate the word go-to. It's not going to be the go-to tool, but it's got its uses. If it was split into two tools, reduce the size of that, round off these corners so they're not so sharp, do away with that external angle, I think you're onto a winner. That as a separate tool, because it's got its uses. Right, enough of that, those. I want to move on to shears now. Quick one on shears, so bear with me. Shears, they're not scissors, they're shears. Now, back in the day at college, we never had anything as good as this. They were proper bull-nosed, what you'd imagine tailors using for cutting fabric. There was sharper top part, and then the bull nose was the bottomer, heavier piece. Yeah, you'd know what I mean if you saw it. They were heavy, and you used to sharpen them every so often because they used to go wrong. Stuff moves on. Now, these shears, this is Fat Hog, which is through Johnson's Paints. These are lovely. They're lightweight, they're sharp, they stay sharp for ages, and this is what my day-to-day hanging shears are. This is what they're like. Now, go back a number of years, Beeline used to do the best shears out there. Now, I know people are shouting at me saying, oh, you want to try those Axis ones? They're ever so sharp. I know they're sharp, but to me, they still look like a tailor's pair of shears. They look heavy, they look cumbersome, they're not manoeuvrable as much as what these are, and you know what I mean, manoeuvrable. They're not lightweight, move them about. But going back to Beeline, Beeline made a cracking pair of shears. Now these are Beeline, nearly dropped it. Can you see that? Optima, can you see it there? It's not focused. Now, this is what the shears are that I'd be wanting every single day. Unfortunately, Beeline, did they go bust? But let's put it this way, they don't make these anymore, and I've had to resort to these. These are the second best for a make-do shear for me, because these were awesome. And you're going to say, why? Why aren't it some differently? Right, they were sharp, really sharp. They closed too nicely. As you close them to at the end, they close to on you. Can you see that? I hope you can see it. I'll do it against the back. They close to all the way. Whereas these don't always close to. You see that? Another thing is, look at the end of that. Can you see how sharp that is? I'm going to try and focus in. Can we focus in on that? It's tracking my head. It's tracking my head. These, see the point on there? It was a proper sharp point that you could get into corners and you could cut them really nicely. These altered to be like these. These are a beeline. These were a beeline professional. You see the difference in the end? I think you can try and get it there. You might be. They're not as sharp. You know what? I'm going to turn off autofocus. Right, there you go. Put you on manual. Do it on manual. Right. Get you on manual. Right. Look at these. At the end, they don't close too so well. Look, you can see that there's a gap there. Yeah, there's a gap there. And the ends were at the optimum. Oh, optimum. Look at the difference in the ends. You see that? Let's close that too. One's fat and one's really pointed. These, brilliant. Go back onto autofocus. These, brilliant. The newer ones, not so good. These are making do. So if Beeline's watching, or anybody that owns Beeline, go back to what these were. Lightweight, or even thickness. It's more slender, but it's the point that cuts there that makes the difference. That's it. Beeline Optima. That's it. Right, let's move on. Right, hanging brush. Oh, I've got a pencil here since it. Right, I've got a pencil, HB pencil. When you're paper hanging, HB pencil. Now you're going to say, why is the tape round it? You know when you overlap an internal angle and you need 5mm, few millimetre overlap round it. If you've got a pencil with some tape round it, you can run that tape into the angle down against the wall, and it holds you off from the corner just enough that allows the paper to have wrapped round. Make sense? So you run it down the corner, but it's not going into the angle, it's keeping you away from the corner, giving you a line to cut. Now an HB pencil is the one you need. It's not too hard, it's not too soft. So always keep it sharp. This is nearly coming to the end of its life because we're coming up to the tape, but you can take that off and get another one. Got plenty in the box. HB pencil, paper hanging. Hanging brush. I'm on my, this is my, in 32 years, it's only my second. It's only my second hanging brush. This is a Purdy. Beautiful bristle. Somebody will correct me if I'm wrong. Are they a hog bristle? I'm not sure what they're made from. Not be horse, but that's a proper natural bristle. Now these wear with time. Now my original one was my father's, and it wore out and it went quite short. Now if I showed you Brian, who works for us, who's been with us since 1966, his is quite short, wearing down. He's had new ones over the years. And my father's, he's got an original one that is really stumpy. They're still good to keep by you if you've got a really heavyweight vinyls that you need to get pressure down. Get the pressure on the surface to get the paper down. But for the day-to-day wallpapers, this is fine. Moving on from this, we're going to look at the squeegees that you use, the spatula squeegees. So we're going to bring those over. Apprentice? Yes. He's only young. Thank you. Right, these are what probably people are using instead of a hanging brush. Everything's got its place. Now these are lovely. These, because they get into the corners, they get up to the top. Some people even use these to cut as a straight edge. Now I won't advise that because they're not as sharp. Can you see that? They're not a sharp edge to cut against. They're still a little bit fat. So if you're going up against coving and cutting across there, it's going to leave you a little bit more paper there than you need to be leaving. That's up to you. I'm only going to tell you how I'm going to be doing it. But again, this one was given to me by Mike just to try out. I'd already got one and they're brilliant. They're very handy if you've got some of these non-wovens to get them down, get them into the corner, spread them out, make sure there's no air bubbles. Ideal. But I've still got a hanging brush because there's something about a hanging brush that can just easily go over the wallpaper and get any last bits of air bubbles out. And the other thing that I didn't mention with the hanging brush, sometimes you have to manipulate paper. And you're going to go, what do you mean? Sometimes the wall surface is a little bit uneven and the paper only goes where it'll want to hang. Now you might need to move that, bump it across. You can't bump across with a smoothing spatula. you can with a hanging brush. Right, next one, ruler. Take measure. Meter ruler, 36 inches. My father's got one in wood that is actually a 3-foot ruler. I'm working with some old boys, aren't I? I'm still measuring in feet and inches. I'm doing even my own measurements. It might be, I don't know, 3 meters, 6 inches on measurements, just to make it simple. But no, nice to have a proper ruler. These are ideal, and you've seen over the left shoulder where I've been doing marking off paper, the paper hanging in other videos. I like to use this because if I need to cut down the length of wallpaper with the width, say a width of wallpaper is 22 inches and I need to take 7 inches off it, I can get this ruler, get my finger at the 7-inch position, I folded it up, hold it at 7 inch, put the pencil against it, my pencil's gone, and then go top to bottom. Oh, where's my pencil? I'm going to sack you in a minute.
Oh yeah.
I put the pencil against the end, hold it there, and as I come down the paste table, my finger's up against the paste table edge, I can draw it top to bottom, 7 inches all the way. Then that gives me a line I can cut to. Self-explanatory really, if you know what you're doing. Give them away. Right, I want the, let's do, what are we on? Blades please, snap off blades. And you can bring over the straight edges. Right, this is another gifted Prezi that I've been given. It's got a blade in it. Move it out, it's got a blade in it. I'll let you have a think about that while I talk about the snap off blades. Put that back in. I think it's full. I'll tell you. Snap off blades, brilliant. You've got to have this. Don't use a Stanley blade that's got just one angle blade cut because it's not going to last. These can snap off dead easy. There's perforations on it. Got to be really careful. Either get a pair of pliers, drop it back down to the line, snap it off, gives you a sharp cut each time. Some papers make these go quite blunt, 2-3 cuts. Some are even less. Some you might get a bit more. You find with lining paper, I always still like to use my pencil and a pair of shears for lining paper because sometimes it can drag up. These are brilliant for non-woven though. Right, you take it out, you replace the blade. If I'm talking to you as a decorator, you already know that, so I won't dwell on that. If you're a DIY amateur and you've not got one like this, get one. Now, you get a pack of blades. These are the, I'm going to just call it Olaf. Alpha. They're Alpha blades, and these are the black blades. They're not the diamond black blades. I wasn't too keen on them. You get one less blade on it, and I didn't feel that they lasted any longer than these black blades. But there you go. You've got 10 cuts on there. You've got first, and then can't see it. There's perforations. There you go. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's probably 8, 9 cuts on that, as in sharp tips. So there's your blades. Simple. Cost. Well, it might be a tenner. Packs of blades, £5. Don't know. Check them out. They vary all the time. Right, so let's move on to this. This was gifted to me. It's got a blade in it. Now it says Super Fresco Easy Cutting. Now I've tried this. Now this is, in principle, this is a straight edge and blade in one. Now, I'm not saying I didn't trust it. I don't want to say I didn't rely on it. I'd want to say I was a bit unsure. I was a bit unsure whether it was going to be doing what I wanted it to do. Probably ideal if you're using Super Frescos, which is Super Fresco. It's got like a polystyrene, plasticky raised relief. You can get Super Frescos. You can get heavy frescoes. It's all different things. Oh, while I'm on the frescoes, you can't really use seam rollers on duplex papers, blown vinyls, and also embossed papers because you'll press the relief down. Would that make sense? Did I need to say that earlier? Never mind. Covering it now. Where I did find this handy, you know when you've got a door frame up to a corner and you might only have a gap between the door frame and the corner and you need to cut into that angle. That was brilliant because what you did, you could score straight down the corner with it's like in effect a straight edge, and your blade comes out and it cuts it at the same time. So as you're scoring top to bottom, and it's quite a tight gap, you can't really get a blade in very easy. Where you've got a tight gap between a door frame and an internal angle corner, that was a godsend to me, and that used recently, it made a lot nicer cut because it was holding the paper down at the same time as the blade was cutting it. So this has its place. I did think it was good for going across the tops of skirtings or pictorial skirting boards, going round that way. I still like the traditional blade, and that leads me nicely on to my straight edges. Right, these are straight edges. Don't need to go on too much about these. They've got a nice handle on them. They're sharp, whereas the smoothers, they're not as sharp as that. This gives you a perfect, lovely, beautiful cut. The downside is, I know, loosely, the downside is if you've got coving that's a little bit wavy and the bottom edge isn't that good, this is giving you a straight cut. So I would say don't always use the longer one. This is a Pro Deck one, can you see it? Don't use the longer one, use the shorter ones, because you might want to be cutting with a blade. Where's the blade, please?
Which one?
Stanley, yeah. It's not it's a
Stanley.
brand name. We all call them Stanley blades, don't we? Right. So use this. There's your straight edge, and you're cutting all the way along. Now some surfaces might not be flat. Don't rely on that what you're cutting into is actually going to be as flat as this is for cutting. You might need to cut a little bit at a time and move this with you as you're doing your cut, to use this as your guide, but don't rely on it going all the way across in one. You might need to just use your common sense. If you put that up under your coving and it's rocking, you're not going to do one cut across that blade, are you? Of course you're not, because you'll be at the wrong position for where the cut is. You need that blade to be following the line of the coving, even if it just does go up or down. Use this as the guide. Make sense? Yeah, hopefully. Right, just to prove something, look how sharp that edge is there, right? Compared to how sharp that is there. That's fatter. So if you're underneath a coving, cutting using one of these, and I know some of them are geared up for cutting, these are geared up for cutting, but for me, that's leaving me too much paper on the underside of the coving. It's only a fraction, but it does make a difference. If you're using that, it's really sharp. It's really sharp. Right, let's talk about the controversial thing. Plumb bobs. Here's my plumb bob. It's a weight on a string. Now, some people, I've seen them before, some plumb bobs aren't rounded like that. You see that? Aren't rounded. Now when this is on the wall, you hang it down, stop it. That's a plumb line. That's straight, top to bottom. You mark it with a pencil. But some of them are have a bit of a shape on, like a 50p piece or octagonal. Might not even be as many sides as that, 8 sides. Well, if it's got a flat side on it, if it's touching against your wall, it might stay in that position instead of the vertical position. Seems daft. It needs to be rounded, doesn't it, so it can roll with the walls. Downside of these, yeah, they're accurate top to bottom, like a spirit level, aren't they? Always going to give you a true horizontal or vertical. This will give you a vertical, but on some walls they might be running off, and that plumb bob hangs top to bottom, but it's actually away from the wall. Well, how do you put your string line against the wall to mark it off if it's hanging off the wall? Does that make sense? If it's hanging off the wall, how do you mark it? With great difficulty. So for me, I've not used this now for 6 years properly, for 6 years. Why? Because technology moves on. I joke with people, builders aren't digging footings anymore with a spade or a shovel. They're using mini diggers, JCBs, proper dig. That's a company name. Now we've got laser liners. Now this will give me a horizontal and a vertical. Make sure that you put this laser liner behind you. Don't put it to one side thinking that that's going to give you, because it doesn't give you the true line. You've got to, I'm giving this top tip Tuesday, make sure this is behind you for what you're hanging your paper on. So if I'm doing the wall behind me, all these fancy slats in the garden, make sure that it's opposite it. Don't do it on an angle, keep it in line, because that will give you a true line. Advantage of this is, and I've said it before, above a window, below the windowsill, over the radiator, this will give you that true line top to bottom. A plumb bob won't, because the plumb bob will come down, it'll touch the windowsill, that'll throw it out, it'll touch the radiator, that'll throw it out. So to me, don't struggle, get yourself one of these. How do I attach this? I'll open it up for you. You can probably just see it. Comes with some, you see that? UV glasses, so you can see the blade, see the laser a lot easier. Turn it off. But this attaches, it's got a clamp on it. You screw that onto there. And what's nice about this, just tighten it up, this will attach to virtually anything. So whether it be your pair of steps, I use a large extendable roller pole. I clamp it to that, and then I can move it around the room. I wedge it between the floor and the ceiling. It's got a sanding pad face, wedge it up, this clamps to it, and I can move it around. And that's how it works. Gives you a horizontal, gives you a vertical. You're going to say, oh, you can use a spirit level. Get with the times. I'm going to be horrible, I'm going to pick on you. Get with the times. Spend your 60 quid and get one of these. You can get them cheaper, but this is a decent quality one. It's got a fixed, it's like a gyroscope, can you see that? It's wobbling, so it levels. If you're not, it flashes. If you're not level, you level it all up and then you're right. Now coming back to horizontals and verticals, I find this very handy when I'm going around a corner or into a corner and back out, because it allows me to keep an eye on the pattern match into a corner and back out of a corner on the horizontal line, not just the vertical. So for me, this is 50-60 quid well spent, that a room, you could go around a room and keep that pattern match going all the way around. And if you've seen in previous videos of wallpapering, there's some wallpapering videos there, I show you using this, and it is, I don't say a lifesaver, it's not quite a lifesaver, but yeah, game changer. This is the game changer. If you've not gone into wallpapering with one of these, please do. I don't want to say dinosaurs, but this is brilliant. I'm not saying I don't still use a plumb bob, but I'll use a plumb bob if I haven't got this with me. Why would I go back to a plumb bob? The question of the day, why would I go back to a plumb bob? This is doing what the plumb bob did and more. And on that note, I think I've gone through all the tools of a paper hanger. We've probably had half an hour of a sit down and a chat. I hope your tea and coffee's not gone too cold. I think I've covered everything. My main thing was the tools of a paper hanger. Dead easy, just light-hearted. So, some videos there. Subscribe if you're interested. Watch those videos. Thank you. Bye bye.